my dear friends. Thank you for tuning into this latest episode of Love, Service, Wisdom with myself, Rada Wepner. And in this show, I'm in conversation with Bruce Tallman, who has been in a private practice as a full-time spiritual director for the past 20 years. He works mainly with clergy from every Christian denomination, and he also works with people who are agnostic, atheist, or quote-unquote spiritual but not religious. Bruce has published many books over the years, including Archetypes for Spiritual Direction, Discovering the Heroes Within, 1,000 Spiritual Lessons, Wisdom and Peace for the Overbusy, Overinformed, Overworked, and Over-Whelmed. And then his most recent book is God's Ecstatic Love, Transform Your Life with a Spiritual Masterpiece. That is commentary on St. Francis de Sales' 1660 spiritual classic, Treatise on the Love of God. The goal of this book is to help teach people the most important life skill of all, how to love God or how to be a contemplative mystic. And in this conversation, it was kind of fun for me to talk with somebody who comes from the Christian denomination, where a lot of folks that I talk to touch more on Hinduism or spirituality in general, let's say. So with Bruce, we could find God through the angle of Christianity, the doorway of Christianity, which is what I was raised with as a child, and probably a lot of you listeners were too. We started off in a Christian denomination. Perhaps some of us still are in some form. And so Bruce and I, we weave together the overlays of different traditions with the Christian tradition and how they complement each other, and essentially what it means to be a modern day contemplative mystic. You can find more about him and his work at brucetallman.com. That's Tallman, just like it sounds, Tallman. And his books will be found at brucetallman.com/books, or check out his blog at brucetallman.blog. And as far as my own life, it's been a pretty busy end of summer where Krishna and we went out to New York with my daughter Maya to bring her into ceremony on the farm that we host events at quite a bit. East Forest has been hosting events there for almost his whole career, really. And that was really magical and super special. Perhaps Krishna and I will do a podcast specifically on that. And then touring around New York City for Maya. I wanted to take her there as a senior year trip. She's starting college actually in just a couple days from now. And most of the time when we've gone on trips with her around the world or whatever, it's more like mountains, rivers, beaches, nature, outdoor, desert. So this was quite different, where it was, let's go to the iconic global big city of New York City and expose her to all the diversity and the beauty and the magic and the history and the culture that a big city has to offer. So we did that for a few days, which was really wonderful. Saw a few Broadway plays, ate lots of great food, went to museums, enjoyed summertime in New York City. And then Krishna and I headed down to the summer mountain retreat, where it was a topic of Buddhism meets Bhakti for the Ram Dass Foundation Love Serve Remember, with different speakers such as Sharon Salzberg and Bob Thurman, and of course Krishna Das speaking and leading kirtan every night. There was an East Forest performance. Shantala was there to perform and also play for my classes. And Spring Washam was there as well, which was a great addition to the satsang. And I was given the opportunity to lead yoga every day for everyone and have live music, either Shantala or East Forest, and then on Sunday to guide a special ceremony labyrinth experience. And just, it filled me up to the highest degree. I'm so grateful for that. And then we got back, and Krishna got COVID from our travels. So I was the caregiver for quite a while he got through his first official diagnosis of COVID. First time he's actually tested positive for COVID. So we took care of that, and he's doing a lot better. And then recently a lot of travels just in the other realm of my world with Journey Space, going to California for a few events. And then just this past weekend, we were in Portland for the Horizons Northwest conference, which was focused on psychedelic medicine and this psychedelic, I don't want to use the word renaissance, but resurgence or growth spurt, we should say, particularly around psilocybin mushrooms. And that was quite fascinating and beautiful and interesting in its own right. So very busy these past few weeks, and tomorrow I'm driving Maya to college with my ex-husband, Bill. We're so excited for her. So life is just plucking along. Everything's fantastic. Hope your summers have been beautiful as well. And I hope to catch you soon with another Love, Service, Wisdom podcast. For those of you that have given it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or like it on Spotify, I greatly appreciate that. Just that little bit of effort on your part goes a long way for me in making this. So thank you so much. And I really hope you enjoyed this delightful conversation with Bruce Tallman. Welcome, Bruce, to Love, Service, Wisdom.
Thank you for inviting me. This is wonderful.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to learn from you and your work in the world. It's interesting to see, or learn about you, that you have this merging of Christianity and spirituality. Yeah. That you're sort of in that realm, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Mostly, the sort of mystical side of Christianity, I would say. Rather than the sort of fundamentalist dogmatic side.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So with that, what would be the mystical side of Christianity?
Well, the writings of the saints, this book I wrote was God's Ecstatic Love is a 21st century commentary on Treatise on the Love of God by Francis de Sales. He was a Catholic bishop. He was also a mystic. He's considered a saint and a doctor of the church. And so his book, Treatise on the Love of God, is about, how do we love spirit or God, however you conceive of God. I mean, people have all kinds of different notions of what God or spirit is, right? So I tried to give a 21st century update on it because his book was published in 1616. And so, there's been a lot that's happened in the past 400 years. And I mean, one of them is that we're all finding out about other religious traditions and hopefully coming to appreciate them. So Christian mysticism, I mean, there's a lot of modern mystics, Richard Rohr, Thomas Merton. You may have heard of Teilhard de Chardin. Do you know Teilhard?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But tell our listeners about some of the modern mystics.
Well, I think Richard Rohr is one of the wisest people on the planet. He's very broad-minded and inclusive and enlightened, I would say. The great commandment of Christ was to love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And so that's what most mystics are trying to do. Probably all of them. I mean, they're trying to have a direct experience of God, or spirit, And I think that's what Hindus and Buddhists and Muslims and Jews are trying to do, at least the mystical side of those traditions. I'm a fan of Thich Nhat Hanh and the Dalai Lama. And the Dalai Lama said that, rather than digging 10 shallow wells. I mean, if you dig 10 shallow wells, you'll never hit the underground river. You'll never, hit water. So it's better to dig one really deep well, really go into one tradition in depth. And if you do that, you will connect up with the underground river that connects all the traditions. And so my approach to Christianity and other religions is that we're all trying to connect with this source, whatever that is, Christ consciousness, absolute bliss consciousness, as Maharishi used to say. And I was big into him for a while. Transcendental meditation. Christian meditation is pretty much the same as transcendental meditation. And, it all takes us to that deeper underground river if, we hang in there and we practice consistently, and we're fortunate. I mean, a lot of this is just by grace. You can't make it rain, but you can prepare the soil.
Well, I've got a couple questions for you in all of that. One, I hear that your definition of a mystic is one who lives in like connection or communion with God.
Yeah. Again, however you conceive of God.
And however you conceive of God. So in that way, anyone who might feel like they're living with, would you describe it like they're living with the presence of God or with the knowing of God?
The presence of God. I mean, there's lots of books written about practicing the presence of God, So I think that's the essence in all traditions. I mean, that's kind of the essence of Zen Buddhism, right? Is to practice being in the present. And Eckhart Tolle, I'm sure you know Eckhart Tolle. I mean, he wrote about the power of the present, or, the power of now, rather. I think that's kind of the essence of all religious traditions, because that's really where you meet, spirit or higher consciousness, your true self, however you want to frame it.
I've got a question for you then too. Just based on my own practices, recently, when I've been sitting down to meditate, I have been doing that, which is instead of maybe focusing on a mantra or witness consciousness, I've been invoking the invitation of God and just feeling the energy of God, which feels like love, to put it briefly. But then I notice, because of my conditioning, having been raised Roman Catholic, that I think of God as masculine.
Yeah. I know
and I don't necessarily want to think of God as masculine.
Of course. That's a huge hang up for a lot of people. And, even with myself, I think I still have vestiges of this image of God I was given as a kid. I grew up in the United Church of Canada, which is a very liberal church. But even there, they were, in the 50s, they were conveying to us somehow that God was masculine. And God is beyond gender. God is ineffable.
Yes.
And, if we start off with the idea that God is ineffable, let's approach this whole topic with humility and maybe learn from other traditions and be open to learning from each other. Otherwise you get, I think, a real distortion of Christianity, and that is the kind of fundamentalist stuff that, is very dogmatic and kind of we're right and you're wrong. And I think it's dangerous, actually. Yeah.
It is dangerous. It does the opposite of what you would think God would want.
Exactly.
Which is separation. It causes separation versus unity.
Unity is where it's at. Unitive thinking. We're into so much dualistic thinking, either or thinking, and that's what's really polarizing things so much. And nobody can seem to listen to the other side anymore and respect the other side. So it's a massive problem.
It's a massive problem. There's so much fear.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm just going back to God as male. When I notice that I'm getting caught up on feeling this masculine energy, I then try to switch it to goddess, right? Because then I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to then bring in the goddess, which then equally in a different way feels not quite right also. And I think perhaps it's one, because it feels so unfamiliar. And again, because of our cultural programming and conditioning of how we perceive the feminine. Also, the feminine goddess language carries its own stereotypes.
That's right. Yeah. I think in Catholicism, you know, I'm a convert to Catholicism, but I was never big into Mary. But, you know, the more I think about it, I mean, Catholicism has kind of made Mary into a goddess, you know, in a way. And I think that you have to have some way of, you know, connecting with the feminine side of God as well as the masculine side. And both are good, but one, you know, one or the other just by themselves doesn't quite work. It's like breathing with only one lung or something. You know, we need both. We need the masculine and the feminine, I think.
We do need both. Yeah, and to that point about Mary, I love Guadalupe. I love her. She's with me a lot, all of the time, as a major player, let's just say, in my inner world. And I hadn't thought of then making the meditations Guadalupe focused, which they very well could be. And to your points that you made in the beginning of taking a well really deep versus broad.
Yeah, we're all connected, I think. You know, I mean, that's unitive thinking. We're connected on a unitive level, but you know, the danger of getting into one tradition is sometimes that you don't go far enough. I think if you go far enough, you'll hit the underground river. But if you just get partially into any tradition, you can become dogmatic and narrow-minded, and, you know, again, which is causing a lot of problems throughout the world.
And I think I see within my own life, and I witness around me and other, let's just say, seekers, that because, like you mentioned, and when you first started talking too, St. Francis's book was written in the 1600s before we'd even been exposed, we meaning Westerners or Anglo-Saxons, right, to all these other world religions and traditions. And now there's almost like an overexposure. It's a buffet. There's so many options.
Right. Yeah, it is a buffet.
And then there's a tendency, I think, for us to kind of have a little bit of the vanilla pudding and a little bit of salad and a little bit of macaroni and some beets. And there's a sampling, but not a depth. We're not like choosing and committing. There's almost even to a hesitancy or a resistance to commit to one.
For sure. You know, my approach is degrees of truth approach, which there's 4 ways to approach truth. One is that nothing is true, which is kind of the skeptical approach. Another one is everything is true. Another approach is the black and white approach. You know, we've got the truth, you don't. We're the good guys, you're the bad guys. And then there's a degrees of truth approach, which just means that you believe that there are degrees of truth in every tradition. And so this approach allows you to be committed to your tradition and yet open to other traditions, because there's truth in all the traditions, I'm convinced. And as long as you afford other people the right to take that same stance and to believe that maybe their tradition has more truth than your tradition. I mean, I say that this degrees of truth approach, although I'm sort of I think maybe even going beyond that into sort of this transcendental approach of just, okay, God is in everything, and but the degrees of truth approach, at least in the past, allowed me to be committed to one tradition and yet open to other traditions, because I didn't believe that, for example, all the truth was in Christianity or Catholicism. I mean, it's obvious to me from reading the scriptures of other traditions like the Quran or the Bhagavad Gita that all those traditions deeply know about God too. And so, but the degrees of truth approach allows you to dig deeply in one tradition without becoming narrow-minded, I hope, anyway. Mm-hmm. And as long as you allow other people to take the same stance from their tradition, it's all good. We can all learn from each other and cross-fertilize each other.
Yeah, and I guess I see it in even a slightly different way, where what I feel like I'm witnessing is the degrees of truth where it's all true, and I want pieces of all of it. Yeah. Like I want to consume pieces of all of it.
Yeah, which is kind of a consumer approach to religion or spirituality, really. And maybe,
or like a FOMO, like if I need a little bit of that because I might miss out on that's experience that they're offering over there.
Yeah, fear of missing out. I think that's huge. Not, maybe this is the way of Spirit moving us all into learning initially about other traditions, but it's also, again, good to go deep into one tradition and still be open to everybody else as well.
So your advice would be sample and pick one.
Yeah.
And dedicate yourself and devote and learn what's really there.
Yeah. Yeah. Although, I think, I was really into Maharishi and transcendental meditation. And then I got into graduate school in psychology, and I was working full time and doing this heavy, graduate course load. And I just found that I couldn't meditate anymore. I was too stressed out all the time. And, I was doing yoga at that time. So I continued the yoga for a while, which was good. I mean, the transcendental meditation and the yoga were really good for me. But then I was in sort of a spiritual wasteland for a while. And then I met my wife, to be Grace, who came from kind of a fundamentalist evangelical Mennonite background. And the main thing she did for me spiritually was introduce me to the Bible, which, was wonderful. And now I look at the Bible as sort of, okay, it's inspired by God, like other traditional scriptures of other traditions. But it's written through human beings. And so it's not like, this is like a science textbook or something. I mean, it's full of scientific errors and so on. It's a faith statement, like the scriptures of other traditions. I think they're all faith statements in one way or another. So my approach to God is, like, we don't know God. I mean, we believe. If you go deep enough, though, you experience God more and more, and you do know God from the heart level, not just the head level. So, yeah.
In your work with the Bible and having it be introduced from a fundamentalist perspective from your wife, is it more literal or metaphor?
Yeah, it's metaphor. She didn't introduce me to a literal approach to the Bible, although that would have been her approach at the time. But her parents didn't want me to marry her because I wasn't born again, So just to impress them, I took a course on the Old Testament, and which was a horrible course. The professor plagiarized everything. But I actually had to open up the Bible and read it. And I opened it up at Proverbs, which is all these wisdom sayings. So it's really the wisdom literature of the Bible that I get into the most, I would say. And, there's wisdom literature in every tradition, of course. That's my approach is, it's like Richard Rohr says. I mean, the literal approach is important, but it's the least productive way to approach the scriptures. There is usually some historical truth to the stories in the Bible, but if you stay at that level, of making everything literal, it doesn't really get you into the depths of the scriptures or the depths of your heart.
Could you give us an example of a story from the Bible that you could take symbolically and show us what those symbols are?
Sure. The whole story of David and Goliath,
Okay.
So David is going to be the future king of Israel, and the Israelites are warring with the Philistines, and the Philistines have this champion warrior, Goliath. Like, he's this huge man. He's been a warrior all his life. And David, who was a shepherd, says to King Saul, the king of Israel, let me fight this guy, because I've killed a bear, I've killed a lion, with my slingshot. And so the king lets him fight Goliath, and we all know how that story ended. I mean, he kills Goliath. But, you can take that symbolically as this is, how to approach the big roadblocks in your life. The really, the really hard things in your life, the things that you can't seem to get beyond. I mean, with courage and the help of Spirit or God, it's possible to overcome anything. So if you take it on that mystical level, a symbolic level, it's got a meaning that you can apply today. There probably was some historical basis to the whole story of David and Goliath. But, again, the literal approach is just sort of the beginning. And, unfortunately, probably 70% of Christians and probably 70% of other people in other religious traditions get stuck at the literal level. And, then you get into fundamentalism and which just narrows people's minds. And, as I said, it's a real problem. I think we're seeing that I'm in Canada, but we're always sort of watching the United States with trepidation to see what's going on down there. We probably know more about American politics than Canadian politics.
What current misstep are we taking now?
Yeah, well, I mean, the U.S. is a great country. There's no question. But, sometimes it does seem to get off track a bit.
Yes, it does seem to get off track. When I think of the symbology and I'm reading a certain text, I kind of have fun with it where I think of it like codes, and I'm like a decoder.
Yeah, that's a good approach.
As I'm reading. What else could it mean? And there's the surface level, that's literal. And then if you can decode it, there's a whole other rich meaning or meanings.
Yeah. I mean, you could get into the same thing with the Garden of Eden story. I mean, if you take this talking snake literally, I mean, where does that lead you? It doesn't really go anywhere. But if you take it as, okay, well, everybody wants to do their own thing, as if they can do that independently of Spirit. And, on the symbolic level, it's like, this is the way things happen today too, that we think we can exist without Spirit or without God, and we want to do our own thing, and live according to our own lights, which is, you can do that to a certain extent, but you just don't get the depth and the breadth that, genuine religious traditions offer, genuine spiritual traditions.
No, because they're all trying to reconnect you with Spirit or God.
That's the basic, mission of every major spiritual tradition is to try and connect you with spirit.
And then what happens?
Well, then the roof gets blown off, right? Yeah. So, hopefully you open up your heart, not just your mind, but your heart and your body and everything to God. And I think that's where sacred sexuality comes in too, Christianity, I don't know about other traditions so much, but I think Christianity has done a number up until the past 50 years on sexuality. It's been something you shouldn't even think about.
The repression of it, the distortion of it.
Now there's lots of good spiritual books written about the sacredness of sexuality. It's a great gift from God, and we need to respect this, and you don't want to be sort of, too loose on the one hand or too restricted on the other hand. You need to find sort of a happy balance there, between, being, fully owning your sexuality, but not going crazy with it.
Has there ever been a form of Christian sacred sexuality?
Well, I would look at the Old Testament again, although I like to call it the First Testament, and I like to call it, the Christian scriptures is the Second Testament. If you call it the Old Testament, then it sounds like it's out of date. The Song of Songs in the First Testament, in the Hebrew scriptures, Jewish scriptures, is all about sacred sexuality. That's right in the Bible, and it starts off with, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth," and then it goes on from there and gets more and more erotic as it goes on. So there's that, and there's also the writings of Pope John Paul II. In most of his weekly audiences, for 5 years, he talked about sexuality, believe it or not, and his theology of the body is really. I think it's a gift from God, first of all. I think he was inspired in writing it. And, but it is about that sexuality is a great gift from God. It's a great gift in Hinduism too, I think, right? The universe was kind of created by the intercourse of the gods and goddesses.
And we are all here because our parents had orgasms.
Yeah.
And that's the entire human population.
Yeah, that's right.
And every species procreates. So it can't, in my view, be anything other than sacred when all of life springs out of its act.
Exactly. And spirituality and sexuality come out of the same source. I think the source is wanting to be loved and to love. And that's the union. That's the basis, the basic reality of sexuality. Is that's where it's coming from. We want union with another real human being.
The desire to merge.
Body, mind, heart, and soul. So fortunately, a lot of churches are finally waking up to, sexuality is this powerful gift from God, and it's time we woke up. We've done such a horrible job up until about 50 years ago, and there's been, I think, thanks to modern psychology in particular, that has woken us up to things like self-esteem are actually good things,
self-love.
Self-love is a great gift from God. It's sacred. Before psychology, modern psychology, I was taught growing up in the United Church that, you should think of yourself absolutely last after you think of everybody else. And you shouldn't think of yourself at all, you should just blot out your own selfhood. And I think that created a lot of mental problems for people, really, psychological problems.
Well, so much repression, so much confusion, the martyrdom, the abuse that then you allow to have happen to you.
Yeah, exactly.
The dissociation that happens. And then out of that, the other pendulum swing is into too much individuation, or the narcissism, or it's me by myself, the independence, and forgetting our interdependence.
Yeah, so we all need to remember that we are our brothers and sisters keepers, so I think what happened, because of all the repression, things have swung, the pendulum has swung to the other extreme, where you have kind of, hookup culture, or some people even call it rape culture, where it's just like, it's just casual, super casual sex without any deep emotional connection, and which is in porn, which is a travesty of sexuality. So,
the damage it's doing done, is currently doing,
men and women. I mean, it completely
very far-reaching.
For men, it completely distorts their idea of sexuality, and for women, it's just degrading in most cases. So. Yeah.
And I think about that, those that, unlike our generations that didn't have the access that is now available to pornography, having been raised when you can have it as much as you want. And then again, the distortion that creates, even in how we connect sexually, or what someone who's using pornography so much, then how they're hardwiring themselves to receive that type of pleasure or connection. It's totally different than you would with a partner.
It creates totally distorted expectations about what sex should be like. And the tenderness part of it is just left out. And compassion, and accepting each other's wounds and weaknesses, and So.
Yeah, there's going to be so much cleanup around this in generations to come. At least I hope it's possible to do. And we're seeing the effects of it. I think, it shows up in ways that we don't quite associate with it, but just even the levels of anxiety, depression, loneliness, separation.
Yeah, it's kind of, pornography focuses on performance. Like I said, it leaves out the tenderness and the, dialogue, the understanding, the listening to each other. What do you really want from sexuality? What do I really want? So all that's left out. It's just,
the idea of pleasing another. When it's just you by yourself, it's just self-focused.
Yeah. So,
I'm still so curious that John Paul II wrote something on the theology of the body.
Yeah. You see, I think he thought that Christianity had become too Platonic. It was sort of spirit is good, body or matter is bad. And so, the official Christian teaching is that your body is actually an integral part of who you are. It's not an add-on. It's integral to your spiritual life. And, we're creatures who are unities of spirit and matter, spirit and body. And we got to pay attention to the body. And so I think he wrote it as sort of a, counterbalance to a lot of Christian spirituality, which was about repressing sexuality and, repressing the body. In fact, whipping the body, in some cases, flogging yourself as if that's going to make you more spiritual,
Yes, similar in the Hindu traditions of the ascetics or other religious traditions, where we merge with God through overcoming the desires and needs of the body, that we ignore the body, which is very dualistic, versus realizing we're human beings that are highly sensorial. Our skin is so thin. Our skin is so sensitive. Touch is so exquisite. We don't have armor. We don't have thick skin. So you would think that however we were created, it was on purpose that we can perceive so much through our senses.
Yeah.
It's not an accident.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. I was just reading in somewhere in the Psalms that God is an inexhaustible source of pleasure.
Yeah. Exactly.
So
exactly.
we've been so hung up on pleasure, and but it's definitely, our senses, our bodies are integral to who we are. I mean, so as Christ said, love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And I think by strength he meant your body or your will or something. But the body's integral to. You can't even imagine spiritual things if you didn't have senses. You can't.
Exactly.
You couldn't picture a sunset if you didn't have eyes. You couldn't hear the music of Beethoven or Mozart if you didn't have ears. I mean, this is, these are greatly spiritual things that we would have no access to without our senses.
Have you had experiences, like mystical or spiritual experiences through the senses of your body?
Well, I was watching a sunset a while ago, and it was this beautiful gold, purple, mauve. It was so beautiful. I had this sense of sort of being one with the sunset. So, and I've had other just sort of flashes. I just get flashes every now and then about sort of, all my armor is dropped, and it's just like, I'm one with everything.
So it's a oneness that you feel in your body as like an openness or a soft, a merging there too.
Yeah, it's a heart opening, And as they say, the longest journey in the world is from here to there. That 18 inches, it's like
from your head to your heart.
It's the longest journey in the world. So.
Do you think it's possible to mostly navigate from your heart?
Well, if we're really growing in the spiritual life, I think that's what we're doing. That's what we're heading for more and more, is to live out of the heart, and more than the head. I mean, the head, the head is important, but it's kind of limited, I think, in a way. And I mean, you could be an uneducated person, but have a great open heart, and God just fills your heart. And you could be somebody who's highly educated and they're a jerk. So, and on the other hand, you can have somebody who's really closed down their heart, and maybe they're a jerk, and somebody who's broad enough intellectually to be open to everybody. So but I mean, if all these spiritual practices aren't leading you to be a more wise and loving person, they're really kind of useless.
What would they be doing?
They can make you narcissistic. You can think that you are spiritually superior to other people because you have these mystical experiences, So that's
and I see that too, in a way of like the consumerism of the mystical experiences, or even the psychedelic experiences, the wanting the more, the next, the other.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a never-ending cycle. That the spiritual, like the spiritual egoism that's there. I guess I just hope that there's a point where most can, like, it's a stage on the journey, and then eventually you'd have enough where you realize more isn't where it's at.
Yeah, there are stages to any spiritual journey. I mean, I don't know. Do you know Ken Wilber at all?
Yeah, integral psychology.
Yeah. So he talks about stages, and hopefully we're all progressing through these stages. But there's been a lot of work done similar to what Wilber was doing in the realm of faith. And so there's group faith where you kind of believe what you were taught to believe, you don't really ask any questions. And then there's personal faith where you start asking questions, what does this mean to me? Do I really believe this stuff? Often people feel like they're losing their faith when they get into the personal stage of faith, but actually if they keep going and stay faithful, they're becoming broader and deeper, and they can accept more people from other traditions. And I mean, even within Christianity, there's so many divisions within Christianity, and there's divisions within Islam and Buddhism and Hinduism, and I mean, the goal is hopefully to become broader and broader, so you can accept more and more people who have different, beliefs and approaches and rituals than you do. But that takes a lot of maturity.
Yeah, I just had this sense of I guess I had the thought come through that was like, we're talking about these religions that are Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism. And I had the thought of what is there going to be a new one that comes through? And I guess there's micro new ones that come through, but even the newer one that comes through is perhaps even a blending of the mystical truths of all of them.
Yeah. I think in, the Beatitudes, I mean, Jesus said that blessed are the poor in spirit, or the humble. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the justice seekers, the peacemakers, and so on. I mean, God is not just love, as Christians like to say. God is also wisdom, peace, joy, humility, patience, kindness, trust, respect. And wherever you find those qualities, you find God, whether it's in Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Judaism, or even just in secular humanism. I mean, if secular humanists are becoming more wise and loving, then God, Spirit is working in them, whether they acknowledge it or not. I think the value of all the major religious traditions is, though, that, they kind of take the blinders off. I mean, maybe people who are atheists or agnostics or humanists, I mean, there's value in all those traditions, and I think they're valuable partly because they can keep religions honest. They can critique religion and keep us honest. But sometimes I feel like they're walking towards the sun, but they're wearing blinders, And
the religions.
The atheists. I mean, there's just so much more if you take the blinders off and realize that everything is sacred, basically.
Right. Yeah. There's a quote by Albert Einstein that's something like, you could live like nothing is a miracle, or like everything is a miracle.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. He said that, the biggest miracle in the universe is that the whole thing exists in the first place. The whole thing is miraculous. I mean, so, yeah.
Exactly. What are your thoughts around, I guess, within Christianity, and it feels as if, or my perception of it is, that it is so skewed towards the masculine.
Yeah.
Or the patriarchy.
Yeah.
And even in how it, the stories of how it emerged and kind of, in a way, conquered the more earth-based traditions of Western Europe at the time.
Jesus was very egalitarian. I think the church got off track somewhat. I mean, I don't think it totally got off track, but it got off track somewhat in 313 AD, where it sort of adopted the whole Roman Empire style of governance, and it all became hierarchical. And, as soon as you get agriculture, then you get cities, and then you have to have leaders and so on. And, you get this whole patriarchy going, hierarchies and so on. So, yeah, I think, I mean, in Catholicism anyway, I mean, Mary, like I said, is kind of a goddess, and the church is always referred to as she. And the wisdom, wisdom in the First Testament, in the Jewish scriptures, is always feminine. So,
And there's Sophia,
yeah,
right?
Sophia is wisdom. That's what Sophia means, is wisdom. And philosophia is love of knowledge, is wisdom, or love of wisdom, rather. Love of wisdom. Philos, and then Sophia. So, yeah, I think we're only breathing with one lung if we just have the masculine side of things. And then you get into patriarchy and abuse of women and so on. And it becomes a real problem.
How are you seeing Christianity maybe helping to right that ship and bring in the feminine more?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it happens maybe in Catholicism and the Orthodox traditions. I mean, there are lots of female saints. There's female doctors of the church. Pope Francis is trying to, although I wish he would at least get on with ordaining women as deacons, at least, if not priests. I mean, I really think that needs to happen, and I think it will happen eventually. But at least he's promoting women to high offices in the Vatican. So, he is aware of this inequality, and even within the church, maybe particularly within the church in some ways. That's. I mean, I'm Catholic, but I have a lot of problems with things like not ordaining women as priests and bishops. I mean, I think we've got to start doing that. I mean, right in the Bible it says women were deacons. That's part of the hierarchy. That's part of the ordained orders in the church. It's there in black and white. If you take it literally, in Romans 16, it talks about women deacons. And yet the Vatican is still hemming and hawing over this. And, we have to look at what that meant in those days, back in those days, 2,000 years ago, and interpret what they meant by deacon. It's just like...
What comes up for me is just, why not?
Yeah, exactly.
What's the harm?
Exactly. And women have so much to bring to the table. And, like I said, we're breathing with one lung. Yeah. So we really do need to work on that. In Protestantism, more than Catholicism, I mean, they're I often think about becoming Anglican. In Canada, we call it Anglican. In the States, you call it Episcopalian. But I really like the fact that, Episcopalians, Anglicans, I mean, the ordained women, the head of the Canadian Anglican Church right now is a woman, it's Linda Nichols. I mean, she was the Archbishop of London, of the Diocese of Huron, which covers London and the whole of southwestern Ontario. And then she went on to become the primate. I wish they'd change that word, but as one of my Anglican priests who I work with in spiritual direction said, yeah, the big monkey, the primate.
Yeah, that's a kind of outdated word for sure.
Anyway, so I think, mind you, there's other parts of Protestantism that are even more patriarchal than the Catholic Church is, and so like I said, I hope we're all learning from each other and becoming broader and more open-minded. But
yeah, because even within that context, it feels like, you were mentioning how some don't have room for the differences of another, the differences of a religion. Yeah. There's not the ability to kind of let be. and allow. And then if you're within a religion that doesn't honor women as equally, you're seeing that within the religion.
Yeah, that's fine.
Which creates a form of separation from the inside.
Yeah, that's why I often think about becoming an Anglican, because, they've integrated women more. And also Anglicans get to vote as to who becomes their priest and their bishop. And I think if the Catholic Church adopted those two things, ordination of women and voting of the laity, that would revolutionize things. And I hope it's going to happen. I don't know. I think the problem with being Pope is you have to look at the whole world, and pretty much anything you say or do is going to alienate somebody,
Maybe there could be a female Pope?
Yeah. That would be mind-boggling. That would be great. But, first you need women deacons, women priests, women bishops, and then that'll happen eventually, I think. Although even a layperson can become Pope, apparently. So, yeah, you don't have to be ordained to become Pope.
Okay.
Yeah, you just have to be spiritually enlightened. So that could happen. But at least in the meantime, I'm glad that Pope Francis is elevating women within the Vatican.
I want to circle back around before our time's up to one thing that you said in the beginning, where you expressed that your time with TM was similar to your time with Christianity.
Christian meditation.
And Christian meditation. Yeah. So when you say Christian meditation, what comes to mind is prayer.
Yeah, there's meditation and there's contemplation. Prayer is more like, meditation is more like sort of, intellectually chewing on the scriptures or whatever you're working with.
Christian meditation is that?
Yeah, I mean, these words are used interchangeably, but in my mind, meditation is like active engagement of your mind in, some spiritual reading. It could be the Bible or just some spiritual reading from some modern spiritual writer. Contemplation is when you kind of try to, shut down the thinking and just be in the presence of God. So meditation, some people say is the mother and contemplation is the daughter. And I think that's kind of useful. I mean, meditation is like your own effort, but contemplation is infused. I mean, it's by the grace of God. Like I said, you can't make it rain, but you can prepare the soil. And I think preparing the soil means just sitting quietly, closing your eyes and letting go of your thoughts and just letting spirit flow into and through you.
And that would be Christian meditation?
Yes.
Contemplation?
Yeah. Contemplation, yeah.
Contemplation.
Yeah.
And so then perhaps, I think of like an inviting as you do that, like an opening to, like an asking for, like I'm asking for God or spirit to be with me as I sit here still.
Yeah, you can do that as sort of your introduction to contemplation, as you can verbally pray for, or in your mind you can pray for the spirit, coming in and infusing itself into your life, into your heart, into your soul. They're pretty much the same. The only difference is when I learned transcendental meditation, they gave me a Hindu mantra. And like I said, it was really, really good for me at the time. But then I got into graduate school in psychology and I was too stressed out to, to get into meditation. I still kept doing yoga, and I want to pick up yoga again. Right now I'm doing a lot of sort of aerobic exercises, but I want to get back into yoga for the stretching and the flexibility, I do Tai Chi every day, and that's also for flexibility and strength to some extent. But yeah, I mean, there's cross-pollination, cross-fertilization within Christianity. There's cross-fertilization between all the major traditions if you're open to that. I mean, I think some traditions like Buddhism do things a lot better than Christianity. For example, their meditation on death, is, I haven't found anything, although a lot of saints used to, they'd have a skull on their desk while they were writing, just to remind themselves that, hey, this is limited. This is time limited. And,
the Sufis too have death as part of their practice.
Yeah. Yeah, and I had a Sufi as my own spiritual director for a while, and then we sort of drifted apart. But, I mean, the Sufis are into the ecstatic love of God, which, my book is about. And so I wanted to learn from the Sufis, how do they get into the ecstatic love of God? So the book is about, it's, I think, the greatest work by one of the greatest saints in Christianity, St. Francis de Sales, on the greatest topic: how do you love God or spirit? And I start off the book by just saying, I know God can be kind of a hang-up word for people. So this can mean, your higher power. It can mean bliss consciousness, Christ consciousness, whatever God means to you. I just used God as a shortcut of, but it can mean all these different things to different people, and it does. And people come at spirituality from so many different, directions and mindsets and so on. So I love being a spiritual director. It's challenging, and I also do marriage preparation. I've worked with almost 4,000 couples in marriage preparation, and that's been in the past 34 years. And I like to teach marriage prep couples about sacred sexuality as part of the course, so.
Amazing. I feel like you're probably one of the few marriage, did you say counselor? What did you use? Preparation?
I'm a
marriage preparation coach?
Yeah.
That probably even touches sexuality.
Well, I hope they do. I mean, they should. Only 30% of couples in North America take any kind of marriage preparation. 70% don't. But if it's done well, I think it can be really, really helpful. I teach couples communication methods. I help them practice it in front of me and give them feedback on how they're doing. And I don't know if you know the Myers-Briggs personality inventory, but we look at their different personality types and how they might interact given their different personality types. And then I talk about the 4 stages of marriage: romance, disillusionment, or reality check, misery. And if you hang in there and keep working on your marriage, true love or seasoned love. So, but you sort of have to go through the cross to get to the resurrection, I think, in marriage, Marriage, I think, was meant by God to be a great engine of spiritual growth, because your partner will point out your weaknesses to you. And, you either, the ego hates that. The ego hates having, I wrote an article called Marriage Bonfire of the Ego, and I think it can be a bonfire of your ego if approached properly. That is, you either have to learn to be more humble, patient, kind, respectful, trusting, forgiving, or you don't succeed in marriage. So it forces you to grow spiritually.
100%. 100%, you're right. And I think for couples going into it, knowing that, and knowing the stages that will come past the romance is really important to give it context.
It is really important. I think the wedding industry almost sets couples up for failure because they convey this image of marriage as just this wonderful, blissful bowl of cherries. And anybody who's been married for any length of time knows that it's a challenge. It's a huge challenge in every way. So, yeah, to really learn to love another real human being who really is different than you are, you know?
Mm-hmm. And have them see your faults.
Yeah.
And then move through them together. It's so rich. I love that your final stage is did you say true love or seasons
Season
love?
Yeah.
Seasons love. That's just so deep. I feel like I'm in that phase in my own relationship where I say to my partner, somehow I love you more
Yeah. Yeah.
than the
Well,
beginning.
that's the way it should be. I mean, I love Grace, my wife, more than I did at the beginning, and we didn't have a clue what we were getting into, 46 years ago. We just celebrated our 46th anniversary on July 31st.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. It feels like a real accomplishment. I mean, not that we didn't go through hard times. I mean, there was postpartum depression and unemployment and all kinds of struggles, so, but those are the things that we either grow spiritually from, or they crush us and we become bitter and we stay disillusioned, and just cynical.
Yeah. Yeah. A marriage is a commitment to grow together through those hard times.
Exactly.
Really. And what I see in a lot of couples or people express in their relationships is, like how much is kind of clogged between them that's unexpressed or unresolved.
Yeah. I'm part of this men's spirituality movement called the Mankind Project, and which is about healthy masculinity, because there's so much toxic masculinity out of there. Anyway, the Mankind Project is based in indigenous spirituality and Jungian archetypes, and one of the things they do is they teach men how to resolve conflict safely. And so I learned how to do that. I started applying it in our marriage. It totally revolutionized our marriage. And then I started teaching it to marriage prep couples, and those couples love it because, if it wasn't for conflict, marriage would be a piece of cake. I mean, it'd be easy, but I mean, you have your goals, your partner has their goals. And what I hear more than anything is frustration, because your goals and your partner's goals conflict. I mean, they don't always match up. So, yeah.
So how to resolve conflict safely.
Yeah.
Key component of marriage.
Yeah, that's the key component, I think. That's the key part of communication. Mm-hmm. But also expressing your feelings towards each other, And
and safety being a foundation of that.
Yeah.
Both partners feeling safe.
Yeah.
Such good stuff. Such great work that you're doing out there in the world. Bruce, where can people find...
You're doing great work too.
Thanks. I feel blessed. Yeah. I do. I love everything that I get to partake in and be involved in, and it fills me up so much, like I'm sure it does for you. Yeah. So what's your website?
So my website is just www.brucetallman.com, and I am a tall man, so it's just like it sounds, brucetallman.com. I also have a blog. It's www.brucetallman.com/blog. If people want to check out my books, they can just go to my website, and I have 4 books. And the latest book, God's Ecstatic Love, is on there. It, gives a description of the table of contents and the introduction and so on. And I'm hoping that, my lifelong goal is to try to love God with all my heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love others as myself. And I'm hoping that my book will help other people do that, So, yeah.
Beautiful. I love it. I look forward to reading it myself.
Yeah. Well, I hope you find it really helpful.
Yeah. I feel like exploring that love within Christianity more and more is really important for a lot of folks, and a lot of healing can be found there. And like you pointed out in the beginning, there are many Christian mystics.
There are, yes. Male and female.
And you're adding to the lineage of that.
Well, I hope so. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Marissa. It's been wonderful.